friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Now, if you listen to most podcasts, you'll know that they usually put their promotion stuff for their calls to action halfway through or towards the end. But if all goes well, I'm hoping you're going to be asleep long before we get there, so I need to put this stuff up front. As always, the show is brought to you by supporters on Patreon. I'm hearing from more people all the time how helpful they find the show and how valuable it is to them. And those supporters who have the means to help fund it, who've helped me keep it going as long as it has gone, and to keep it going and help me to reach new audiences, are so appreciated. So if you're making use of Sleepy Time Tales regularly to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and of course, if you have the means and can afford it, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales. You can go to the link in the show notes or from the website to take a look. If you support on the show on Patreon, you will have the satisfaction of knowing that you're contributing to the rest and lifestyle improvements of thousands of people. And over and above that, there are real rewards available from as little as $2 a month. At that level, you get early access to the main episode. And then at higher levels, you get weekly bonus episodes and special edits of the main show. So if you don't like listening to the promotional part, or you don't like the intros and you just want the stories, that's your option there. And then, of course, there is the weekly mini-sode, the catnaps, which are very popular with patrons as well. Other methods of support are also listed in the show notes if a monthly contribution seems a bit much. There's the Patreon, the tip jar, and the merchandise store, and others. In fact, I'd like to thank Carla, who threw a little something in the tip jar recently. She's a supporter on Patreon, and every now and then just likes to give a little bit extra. Who's been with me from essentially day one, I think, and listening to the show, and we've interacted a few times over the years and over the time. And because, of course, money helps, that's how you buy things, but the other huge way to help the show, maybe even a better way to help the show, is to spread the word. If there is someone else in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, please sure to tag me in so that I can see and I can thank you. You'll find me at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. And of course, I have to shout out the music. The song I use is Un Désert by Kumiko from Loyalty Freak Music. Their music is available on their website, which you'll also have the link in the show notes. And I've mentioned before, I've got a new song coming up soon for episode 100, also from them, and maybe even a better choice. It's a little bit even more relaxing than the one we have. So go take a look. If you do some creative projects, their stuff's definitely worth taking a look at. And that's enough of that. Thank you for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It does seem a bit of a strange idea. I mean, this is a podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning in emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has always struggled to sleep. Even when I was a baby, I gave my parents sleepless nights for years, and once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep has always been a struggle for me, even since then. Now, a lot of people I knew liked listening, liked sleeping with the TV or the radio on, but I didn't like those things, thinking that silence would help me more. Because TV would have the bright lights and the loud advertising that would disturb my sleep, or radio would sometimes have music that I'd want to listen to, and also really loud ads. So I resisted that sort of stuff and struggled to sleep in silence for many years. A little bit later on, I actually started listening to podcasts, and when I came to terms with the fact that I was going to be lying awake most of the night, I started going to bed with podcasts to listen to, and I'd suddenly find myself waking up halfway through the night, having missed everything that I was trying to listen to. I realized how well the podcast worked for me because they've got a sort of consistent volume across the length of most of the episodes, and people tend to drone on a little bit and go on a bit long. So it was quite effective for me, actually. And I listened to the backlog of a whole bunch of shows that I enjoyed and got through those. And then I eventually discovered that there are podcasts out there specifically for the purpose, actually designed and intended to help people to sleep. I started one and it worked very well for me, and I recommended it to other people, but it didn't work for them sometimes. They didn't like the narrator's voice or the choice of stories or stuff like that. So I thought to myself, I've got this boring, deep, drony voice and the tendency to waffle about things. So let me give it a try and see if I can help those people who can't be reached by the podcast that worked so well for me. And that's how I started up Sleepy Time Tales. Now, every episode starts with, it has a very similar structure. It has the little quick intro that I do in the beginning, and then there's the little advertising / business / promotional bit that I do. We've just gotten through a couple minutes ago now, and then I go into this longer sort of introduction. It's the part of the show that if I do get a complaint, it's the part that I get the most complaints about, because sometimes people just don't quite get it. I think it serves a couple of purposes. I think it's quite important that I make a case to new listeners, like if this has been recommended to you by a friend or someone you know and don't quite get it and they didn't quite explain it, or you've just stumbled across it somehow. I need to sort of make the case for it, which I've been doing, and I need to explain how I think it's helpful for you to engage with it, which is something I'm about to go into. But then for people who've been listening to the show for a while, it serves a very important but very different purpose. For them, what we're trying to do for everybody is create a whole new habit of sleep. Because insomnia in a lot of ways is just bad habits. It's bad sleep hygiene and stress and stuff that gets to us. And the best way to get over a bad habit is to replace it with a good one. At least that's what they say. So what we're trying to do here is create a new habit. This intro is part of that. What I do here is I talk a little bit and I say pretty much the same things most of the time, but it's a little bit different every time. And I help people prepare themselves and their space for sleep. This is where you maybe put it on and have a drink of water and brush your teeth and let it go and sort of prepare yourself mentally for the story to come, which is the what most people think of as the part that helps you sleep. But if you've been listening to the show for a while, you may not have heard any of the stories for months, because I've heard from people that, generally speaking, they don't get out of the intro after they're familiar. Now, for new listeners, as far as I know, there's a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, the idea, and I think this is what works for most people, is I need something to focus on. Because I get stressed and anxious in the dark and worry about things that are out of my control, I need something to keep my mind on a story or an event, to keep me focused on something specific, to stop my mind from spinning out into stress and anxiety. I need to focus just enough not to resist sleep when it comes for me. For some people, it may be something a little bit different, maybe more like a background noise, like some kind of white noise. Some people need the sound of the sea or the sound of the rain or wind in the trees, or maybe just some boring dude telling you a story. Tonight's story is a bit of an interesting one. It's from, I think, the 17th century. It's written by Francis Bacon. Published after his death in 1627, actually. It's basically a kind of a it's a fictionalized sort of philosophical piece about his idea of government and morality and stuff like that. Very religious, very Christian, and sort of his idea of like how governments and societies are supposed to work. There is some slightly problematic stuff which is not unexpected in a 17th century work about different races and things like that. I managed to filter most of it, I think. Hopefully nothing got through. Apologies if they do. And if you do go back and read the story, please be aware that this was written by a racist old white dude in 1620s. So definitely a product of its time. The great risk when we do things like this, unfortunately. Yeah, but that's the story. Still interesting nonetheless, despite its problematic aspects. But I don't want those to disturb people's sleep. So as I say, I'll filter them out as I come across them. But whatever the story is, tonight's one obviously is interesting, but extremely dry. I think it's going to be quite effective to help people sleep. What is important is that you don't force sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of my voice and of the thread of the story, and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, if all goes well, I'm hoping you're asleep long before we get to the end of the episode. But it is also very important, especially if you're new to the show, that you don't feel pressurized. This may not work in the first night. In fact, odds are pretty good it won't. I would bet that it takes at least 2, probably 3 nights for it to either sink in and really start working for you. If after 3 nights it doesn't, then maybe there's better alternatives. Maybe for some reason I just don't resonate with you. It does happen. You may need some time to get used to listening to my voice or my slightly odd accent. And it's also possible, especially if you have a different type of insomnia, that one episode just isn't long enough. Lately, I actually don't struggle to go to sleep so much anymore. What hits me is I wake up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and I struggle to get back to sleep again. To deal with that, what I do is I download a whole bunch of episodes of the shows that I listen to. And then I usually start with the latest one when I go to bed, and then I just let them run all night. Then that way, when I wake up at 3 a.m., just if my earbuds have fallen out, I pop them back in and waft back to sleep again. Sometimes even I wake up even before, just a little bit before my alarm, 60 minutes or 30 minutes before my alarm, and I do exactly the same thing. And you may think to yourself, what exactly is the point of going to sleep when you've got 30 minutes or 60 minutes on the clock left to go? And I've had people thank me actually for suggesting that they do this, because there is something about that, about allowing yourself to go to sleep right before the alarm, that is just satisfying on a whole new deep level. I'm not sure what it is, but it just really does feel like something special. Like that, sometimes if you have a snooze alarm and you snooze and you just like have a really good solid 10 minutes, that can actually make your day feel a lot better. For me, that's very rare. I tend to actually stress out in those 10 minutes. I don't use the snooze alarm, but there have been days when that's really paid off for me. But whether you're listening to the show to go to sleep or listening to it to go back to sleep in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, it is very important that you just try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you, so just give it a chance. As I say, give it a solid 3 nights just to see if there's no other sort of resistance that you have to it. And that's the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I'll tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me, because I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life in a small way, or maybe not so small. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes their lives harder. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. And I need you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep, and the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and we'll try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep can feel like it's your enemy, but it's not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and supposed progress that shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. Introductory note. Bacon's literary executor, Dr. Rowley, published The New Atlantis in 1627, the year after the author's death. It seems to have been written about 1623 during that period of literary activity which followed Bacon's political fall. None of Bacon's writings give in shorter pace so vivid a picture of his tastes and aspirations as this fragment of the plan of an ideal commonwealth. The generosity and enlightenment, the dignity and splendor, the piety and public spirit of the inhabitants of Ben Salem represent the ideal qualities which Bacon the statesman desired, rather than hoped to see characteristic of his own country. And in Solomon's house, we have Bacon the scientist, indulging without restriction his prophetic vision of the future of human knowledge. No reader acquainted in any degree with the processes and results of modern scientific inquiry can fail to be struck by the numerous approximations made by Bacon's imagination to the actual achievements of modern times. The plan and organization of his great college lay down the main lines of the modern research university, and both in pure and applied science he anticipates a strikingly large number of recent inventions and discoveries. In still another way is the New Atlantis typical of Bacon's attitude. In spite of the enthusiastic and broad-minded schemes he laid down for the pursuit of truth, Bacon always had an eye to utility. The advancement of science which he sought was conceived by him as a means to a practical end, the increase of man's control over nature, and the comfort and convenience of humanity. For pure metaphysics, or any form of abstract thinking that yielded no fruit, he had little interest. And this leaning to the useful is shown in the practical applications of the discoveries made by the scholars of Solomon's house. Nor does the interest of the work stop there. It contains much, both in its political and its scientific ideals, that we have as yet by no means achieved, but which contain valuable elements of suggestion and stimulus for the future. The New Atlantis. We sailed from Peru, where we had continued for the space of 1 whole year, for China and Japan by the South Sea, taking with us victuals for 12 months, and had good winds from the east, though soft and weak, for 5 months' space and more. But the wind came about and settled in the west for many days, so as we could make little or no way, and there was some time in purpose to turn back. But then again there rose strong and great winds from the south, with a point east, which carried us up for all that we could do towards the north, by which time our victuals failed us, though we had made good spare of them. So that finding ourselves in the midst of the greatest wilderness of waters in the world, without victuals, we gazed ourselves for lost men and prepared for death. Yet we did lift up our hearts and voices to God above, who showeth his wonders in the deep, beseeching him of his mercy, that as in the beginning he discovered the face of the deep, and brought forth dry land, so it now discover land to us, that we might not perish. And it came to pass that the next day about evening we saw within a kenning before us, towards the north, as it were thick clouds, which did put us in some hope of land, knowing how that part of the South Sea was utterly unknown, and might have islands or continents that hitherto were not come to light. Wherefore we bent our course thither, where we saw the appearance of land all that night, and in the dawning of the next day we might plainly discern that it was a land, flat to our sight and full of buskage, which made it show the more dark. And after an hour and a half sailing we entered into a good haven, being the port of a fair city, not great indeed, but well built, and that gave a pleasant view from the sea. And we, thinking every minute long till we were on land, came close to the shore and offered to land. But straightways we saw divers of the people, with bastions in their hands, as it were, forbidding us to land, yet without any cries of fierceness, but only as warning us off by signs they made. Whereupon, being not a little discomfited, we were advising with ourselves what we should do. During which time they made forth to us a small boat, with about 8 persons in it, where one of them had in his hand a blue tipstaff of a yellow cane, tipped at both ends with blue, who came aboard our ship without any show of distrust at all. And when he saw one of our number present himself somewhat before the rest, he drew forth a little scroll of parchment, somewhat yellower than our parchment and shining like the leaves of writing tables, but otherwise soft and flexible, and delivered it to our foremost man. In which scroll were written in ancient Hebrew and in ancient Greek, and in good Latin of the school, and in Spanish, these words: Land ye not, none of you, and provide to be gone from this coast within 16 days, except ye have further time given you. Meanwhile, if you want fresh water or victuals, or help for your sick, or that your ship needeth repairs, write down your wants, and you shall have that, which belongeth to mercy. The scroll was signed with a stamp of cherubim, wings not spread, but hanging downwards, and by them a cross. This being delivered, the officer returned, and left only a servant with us to receive our answer. Consulting hereupon among ourselves, we were much perplexed. The denial of landing and hasty warning us away troubled us much. On the other side, to find that the people had languages and were so full of humanity did comfort us not a little. And above all, the sign of the cross to that instrument was to us a great rejoicing, and as it were a certain presage of good. Our answer was in the Spanish tongue, that for our ship it was well, for we had rather met with calms and contrary winds than any tempests. For our sick there were many, and in very ill case, so that if they were not permitted to land, they ran in danger of their lives. Our other wants were set down in particular, adding that we had some little store of merchandise, which if it pleased them to deal for, it might supply our wants, without being chargeable unto them. We offered some reward in pistolets unto the servant, and a piece of crimson velvet to be presented to the officers. But the servant took them not, nor would scarce look upon them, and so left us, and went back in the little boat which was sent for him. About 3 hours after we had dispatched our answer, there came towards us a person, as it seemed, of place. He had on him a gown with wide sleeves, of a kind of water chamois, of an excellent azure colour, fair more glossy than ours. His under apparel was green, and so was his hat, being in the form of a turban daintily made, and not so huge as the Turkish turbans, and the locks of his hair came down below the brims of it. A reverend man was he to behold. He came in a boat, gilt in some part of it, with 4 persons, only more in that boat, and it was followed by another boat, wherein were some 20. When he was come within a flight shot of our ship, signs were made to us that we should send forth some to meet him upon the water, which we presently did in our ship-boat, sending the principal man amongst us save one, and 4 of our number with him. When we were come within 6 yards of their boat, they called to us to stay and not to approach further, which we did. And thereupon the man, whom I before described, stood up and with a loud voice in Spanish asked, "Are ye Christians?" We answered, we were, fearing the less because of the cross we had seen in the subscription. At which answer the said person lifted up his right hand towards heaven and drew it softly towards his mouth, which is the gesture they use when they say thank God, and then said, "If you will swear, all of you, by the merits of the Saviour, that you are no pirates, nor have shed blood, lawfully nor unlawfully, within 40 days past, you may have license to come upon land." We said we were all ready to take that oath, whereupon one of those that were with him, being as it seemed a notary, made an entry of this act. Which done, another of the attendants of the great person which was with him in the same boat, after his lord had spoken a little to him, said aloud, "My lord would have you know that it is not pride nor greatness that he cometh not aboard your ship, but for that in your answer you declare that you have many sick amongst you." He was warned by the conservator of the health of the city that he should keep a distance. We bowed ourselves towards him and answered, we were his humble servants and accounted for great honour and singular humanity towards us that which was already done, but hoped well that the nature of the sickness of our men was not infectious. So he returned, and after a while came the notary to us aboard our ship, holding in his hand a fruit of that country, like an orange but of colour between orange tawny and scarlet, which cast a most excellent odour. He gave us our oath, by the name of Jesus and his merits, and after told us that to the next day, by 6 o'clock in the morning, we should be sent to and brought to the stranger's house, so he called it, where we should be accommodated of the things, both for our whole and for our sick. So he left us, and when we offered him some pistolets, he, smiling again, said, "We must not be paid twice for one labour," meaning, as I take it, that he had salary sufficient of the state for his service. For, as I after learned, they call an officer that taketh rewards twice paid. The next morning early there came to us the same officer who came to us at first with his cane and told us he came to conduct us to the stranger's house, and that he had prevented the hour because we might have the whole day before us for our business. For, said he, if you will follow my advice, there shall first go with me some few of you, and see the place, and how it be made convenient for you. And then you may send for your sick and the rest of your number, which you will bring on land. We thanked him and said that this care which he took of desolate strangers God would reward. And so 6 of us went on land with him. And when we were on land, he went before us and turned to us and said, he was but our servant and our guide. He led us through 3 fair streets, and all the way we went there were gathered some people on both sides, standing in a row, but in so civil a fashion, as if it had been not to wonder at us, but to welcome us. And diverse of them, as we passed them by, put their arms a little abroad, which is their gesture when they bid any welcome. The stranger's house is a fair and spacious house, built of brick of somewhat bluer colour than our brick, and with handsome windows, some of glass, some of a kind of cambric oiled. He brought us first into a fair parlour above stairs, and then asked us what number of persons we were, and how many sick. We answered we were in all, sick and whole, 51 persons, whereof our sick were 17. He desired us to have patience a little, and to stay till he came back to us, which was about an hour after. And then he led us to see the chambers which were provided for us, being in number 19. They, having cast it, as it seemeth, that 4 of those chambers, which were better than the rest, might receive 4 of the principal men of our company, and lodge them alone by themselves, and the other 15 chambers were to lodge us 2 and 2 together. The chambers were handsome and cheerful chambers, and furnished civilly. Then he led us to a long gallery like a dorture, which he showed us all along one side, for the other side was but wall and window. 17 cells, very neat ones, having partitions of cedar wood, which gallery and cells being in all 40, many more than we needed, were instituted as an infirmary for sick persons. And he told us withal that as any of our sick waxed well, he might be removed from his cell to a chamber, for which purpose there were set forth 10 spare chambers, besides the number we spake of before. This done, he brought us back to the parlour, and lifting up his cane a little, as they do when they give any charge or command, said to us, "You are to know that the custom of the land requireth that after this day and tomorrow, which we give you for removing your people from your ship, you are to keep within doors for 3 days. But let it not trouble you, nor do you think yourselves restrained, but rather left to your rest and ease. You shall want nothing, and there are 6 of our people appointed to attend you for any business you may have abroad." We gave him thanks, and with all affection and respect, and said, "God surely is manifested in this land." We offered him also 20 pistoles, but he smiled and only said, "What? 'Twas paid?" And so he left us. Soon after our dinner was served in, which was right good viands, both for bread and treat, better than any collegiate diet that I have ever known in Europe. We had also drink of 3 sorts, all wholesome and good: wine of the grape, a drink of the grain, such as is with our ale, but more clear, and a kind of cider made of a fruit of that country, a wonderful, pleasing, and refreshing drink. Besides, there were brought into us great store of those scarlet oranges, for our sick, which they said were an assured remedy for sickness taken at sea. They were also given us also a box of small grey or whitish pills, which they wished our sick would take, one of the pills every night before sleep, which they said would hasten their recovery. The next day after that, our trouble of carriage and removing of our men and goods out of our ship was somewhat settled and quiet. I thought good to call our company together, and when they were assembled, said unto them, "My dear friends, let us know ourselves and how it standeth with us. We are men cast on land, as Jonas was out of the whale's belly, when we were as buried in the deep, and now we are on land, and we are but between life and death, for we are beyond both the old world and the new, and whether we shall see Europe God only knoweth. It is a kind of miracle hath brought us hither, and must a little less, that shall bring us hence. Therefore, in regard of our deliverance past and our danger present and to come, let us look up to God, and every man reform his own ways. Besides, we are come here amongst a Christian people, full of piety and humanity. Let us not bring that confusion of face upon ourselves, as to show our voices or unworthiness before them. Yet there is more, for they have, by commandment, though in form of courtesy, cloistered us within these walls for 3 days. Who knoweth whether it be not to take some taste of our manners and conditions? And if they find them bad, to banish us straightways; if good, to give us further time. For these men that they have given us for attendants may withal have eyes upon us. Therefore, for God's love, and as we love the weal of our souls and bodies, let us so behave ourselves that we may be at peace with God, and may find grace in the eyes of this people. Our company with one voice thanked me for my good admonition, and promised me to live soberly and civilly, and without giving away the least occasion of offence. So we spent our 3 days joyfully, and without care and expectation what would be done with us, when they were expired, during which time we had every hour joy of the amendment of our sick, who thought themselves cast into some divine pool of healing that mended so kindly and so fast. The morrow after our 3 days were past, there came to us a new man that we had not seen before, clothed in blue as the former was, save that his turban was white, with a small red cross on the top. He had also a tippet of fine linen. At his coming in, he did bend us to us a little, and put in his arms abroad. We of our part saluted him in a very lowly and submissive manner, as looking that from him we should receive sentence of life or death. He desired to speak with some few of us, whereupon 6 only stayed, and the rest avoided the room. He said, I am by office governor of this house of strangers, and by vocation I am a Christian priest, and therefore am come to you to offer you my services, both as strangers and chiefly as Christians. Some things I may tell you which I think you will not be unwilling to hear. The state hath given you license to stay on land for the space of 6 weeks, and let it not trouble you if your occasions ask further time, for the law in this point is not precise. I do not doubt, but myself shall be able to obtain for you such further time as may be convenient. Yet shall also understand that the stranger's house is at this time rich, and much aforehand, for it hath laid up revenue these 37 years, for so long it is since any stranger arrived in this part. And therefore take ye no care. The state will defray you all the time you stay, neither shall you stay 1 day the less for that. As for any merchandise ye have brought, ye shall be well used, and have your return either in merchandise or in gold or silver, for to us it is all one. And if you have any other request to make, hide it not. For ye shall find we will not make your countenance to fall by the answer ye shall receive. Only this I must tell you, that none of you must go above a karan, that is with them 1.5 miles, from the walls of the city without a special leave. We answered after we had looked a while upon another, admiring this gracious and parent-like language, that we could not tell what to say, for we wanted words to express our thanks, and his noble free offers left us nothing to ask. It seemed to us that we had before us a picture of our salvation in heaven, for we that were a while since in the jaws of death were now brought into a place where we found nothing but consolations. For the commandment laid upon us we would not fail to obey it, though it was impossible but our hearts should be inflamed to tread further upon this happy and holy ground. We added that our tongue should first cleave to the roofs of our mouths ere we should forget either his reverend person or this whole nation in our prayers. We also most humbly besought him to accept of us as his true servants, by as just a right as ever men on earth were bounden, laying and presenting both our persons and all we had at his feet. He said he was a priest and looked for a priest's reward, which was our brotherly love, and the good of our souls and bodies. So he went from us, not without tears of tenderness in his eyes, and left us also confused with joy and kindness, saying amongst ourselves that we were come into a land of angels which did appear to us daily and prevent us with comforts, which we thought not of, much less expected. The next day, about 10 of the clock, the governor came to visit us again, and after salutations said familiarly that he was come to visit us, and called for a chair and sat him down. And we, being some 10 of us, the rest were of the meaner sort or else gone abroad, sat down with him. And when we were set to begin thus, we of this island of Ben Salem, for that so they called it in their language, have this, that by means of our solitary situation and the laws of secrecy, which we have for our travellers, and our rare admission of strangers, we know well most part of the habitable world, and are ourselves unknown. Therefore, because he that knoweth least is fittest to ask questions, it is more reason for the entertainment of the time that ye ask me questions than I ask you. We answered that we humbly thanked him that he would give us leave to do so, and that we conceived by the taste we had already that there was no worldly thing on earth more worthy to be known than the state of this happy land. But above all, we said, since that we were met from several ends of the world, and hoped assuredly that we should meet one day in the kingdom of heaven, for that we were both parts Christian, we desired to know, in respect that the land was so remote and so divided by vast and unknown seas, from the land where our Saviour walked on earth, who was the apostle of that nation, and how it was converted to the faith. It appeared in his face that he took great contentment in this our question. He said, Ye knit my heart to you by asking this question in the first place, for it showeth that you first seek the kingdom of heaven, and I shall gladly and briefly satisfy your demand. About 20 years after the ascension of our Saviour, it came to pass that there was seen by the people of Renfusa a city upon the eastern coast of our island, within night. The night was cloudy and calm, as it might be some mile into the sea. A great pillar of light, not sharp, but in some form of a column or cylinder rising from the sea, a great way up towards heaven, and on the top of it was seen a large cross of light, more bright and resplendent than the body of the pillar, upon which so strange a spectacle the people of the city gathered apace together upon the sands to wonder, and so after put themselves into a number of small boats to go nearer to this marvellous sight. But when the boats were come within about 60 yards of the pillar, they found themselves all bound and could go no further. Yet so as they might move to go about, but might not approach nearer, so as the boats stood all as in a theatre, beholding this light as a heavenly sign. It so fell out that there was in one of the boats one of the wise men of the Society of Salomon's house, which house, or college, my good brethren, is the very eye of this kingdom, who having a while attentively and devoutly viewed and contemplated this pillar and cross, fell down upon his face, and then raised himself upon his knees, and lifting up his hands to heaven, made his prayers in this manner. Lord God of heaven and earth, thou hast vouchsafed of thy grace of thy order, to know thy works of creation and the secrets of them, and to discern, as far as it pertaineth to the generations of men, between divine miracles, works of nature, works of art, and impostures and illusions of all sorts. I do here acknowledge and testify before these people that this thing which we now see before our eyes is thy finger and a true miracle. And forasmuch as we learn in our books that thou never workest miracles, but to divine and excellent end, for the laws of nature are thine own laws, and thou exceedest them not but upon great cause, we must humbly beseech thee to prosper this great sign, and to give us the interpretation and use of it in mercy, which thou dost in some part secretly promise by sending it unto us. When he had made his prayer, he presently found the boat he was in, movable and unbound, whereas all the rest remained still fast, and taking that for an assurance of leave to approach, he caused the boat to be softly and with silence rowed towards the pillar. But ere he came near it, the pillar and cross of light brake up, and the cast itself abroad, as it were into firmament of many stars, which also vanished soon after. And there was nothing left to be seen but a small ark or chest of cedar, dry and not wet at all with water, though it swam. And in the fore end of it, which was towards him, grew a small green branch of palm. And when the wise man had taken it with all reverence into his boat, it opened of itself, and there were found in it a book and a letter, both written in fine parchment and wrapped in sindons of linen. The book contained all the canonical books of the Old and New Testament, according as you have them, for we know well what the churches with you receive, and the Apocalypse itself and some other books of the New Testament, which were not at that time written, were nevertheless in the book. And for the letter it was in these words: I, Bartholomew, a servant of the highest and apostle of Jesus Christ, was warned by an angel that appeareth to me in a vision of glory, that I should commit this ark to the floods of the sea. Therefore I do testify and declare unto that the people who God shall ordain this ark to come to land, that in the same day it is come unto them salvation and peace and goodwill, for the Father and from the Lord Jesus. It was also in both these writings, as well as the book as the letter, wrought a great miracle to confirm to that of the apostles, in the original gift of tongues. For there being at that time in this land Hebrews, Persians, and Indians, besides the natives, everyone read upon the book and letter as if they had been written in his own language. And thus was this land saved from infidelity, as the remainder of the old world was from water, by an ark, through the apostolical and miraculous evangelism of St. Bartholomew. And here he paused, and a messenger came and called him from us. But this was all that passed in that conference. The next day the same governor came again to us, immediately after dinner, and excused himself, saying that the day before he was called from us somewhat abruptly, but now he would make us amends and spend time with us if we held his company in conference agreeable. We answered that we held it so agreeable and pleasing to us as we forgot both dangers past and fears to come, for the time we hear him speak, that we brought an hour spent with him was worth years of our former life. He bound himself a little to us, and after we were set again, he said, "Well, the questions are on your part." One of our number said, after a little pause, that there was a matter we were no less desirous to know than fearful to ask, lest we might presume too far. But encouraged by his rare humanity towards us, that should scarce think ourselves strangers after his vowed and professed servants, we would take the hardiness to propound it, humbly beseeching him, if he thought it not fit to be answered, that he would pardon it, though he rejected it. We said, "We well observed those in his words which he formerly spake, that this happy island, where we now stood, was known to few, and yet knew most of the nations of the world, which we found to be true, considering that the languages of Europe knew much of our state and business. Yet we in Europe, notwithstanding all the remote discoveries and navigations of this last age, never heard of the least inkling or glimpse of this island. This we found wonderful strange, for that all nations have entered knowledge one of the other, either by voyage into foreign parts, or by strangers that come to them. And though the traveller into a foreign country doth commonly know more by the eye than he saith at home can by relation of the traveller, yet both always suffice to make a mutual knowledge in some degree on both parts. But for this island we had never heard tell of any ship of theirs that had been seen to arrive on any shore of Europe, nor of either the West or East Indies, nor yet of any ship of any other part of the world that had made return from them. And yet the marvel rested not in this, for the situation of it, as his lordship said, is the secret conclaves of such a vast sea might cause it. But then that they should have knowledge of the languages, books, affairs of those that lie such a distance from them, it was a thing which we could not tell what to make of, for that it seemed to us a conditioner and propriety of divine powers and beings to be hidden and unseen to others, and yet to have others open and in a light to them. At this speech the governor gave a gracious smile and said, that we did well to ask pardon for this question we now asked, for that it is imported, as if we thought this land a land of magicians that send forth spirits of the air into all parts, to bring them news and intelligence of other countries. It was answered by us all in all possible humbleness, but yet with countenance taking knowledge, that we knew that he spake it but merrily, that we were apt enough to think there was some way supernatural in the island, but yet rather as angelical than magical. But to let his lordship know truly what it was that made us tender and doubtful to ask this question, it was not any such conceit, but because we remembered he had given a touch in his former speech that this land had laws of secrecy touching strangers. To this he said, "You remember it aright, and therefore is that I say to you, I must reserve some particulars, which it is not lawful for me to reveal, but there will be enough left to give you satisfaction. You shall understand, that which perhaps you will scarce think credible, that about 3,000 years ago, or somewhat more, the navigation of the world, especially for remote voyages, was greater than at this day. Do not think with yourselves that I know not how much this is increased with you within these 60 years. I know it well, and yet I say greater than now. Whether it was that the example of the ark that saved the remnant of men from the universal deluge gave men confidence to adventure upon the waters, or what it was. But such is the truth. The Phoenicians, and especially the Tyrians, had great fleets, so had the Carthaginians their colony, which is yet further west. Toward the east the shipping of Egypt and of Palestine was likewise great. China also, and the great Atlantis, that you call America, which have now but junks and canoes, abounded then in tall ships. This island, as appeareth by faithful registers of those times, had then 1,500 strong ships of great content. Of all this there is with you sparing memory or none, but we have a large knowledge thereof. At that time this land was known and frequented by the ships and vessels of all the nations before named, and as cometh to pass, that many times men of other countries, that were no sailors that came with them, as Persians, Chaldeans, Arabians, so as almost all nations of might and fame resorted hither, of whom we have some strips, and little tribes with us at this day. And for our own ships they went sundry voyages, as well to your straits, which you call the Pillars of Hercules, as to other parts of the Atlantic and Mediterranean seas, as to Paguin, which is the same with Cambaline, and Quincy upon the Oriental seas, as far as to the borders of the East Tartary. At that same time, and an age after or more, the inhabitants of the great Atlantis did flourish. For though the narration and description which is made by a great man with you, that the descendants of Neptune planted there, and of the magnificent temple, palace, city, and hill, and the manifold streams of goodly navigable rivers, which as so many chains environed the same site and temple, and the several degrees of ascent whereby men did climb up to the same, as if it had been in Scala Coeli, be all poetical and fabulous, yet so much is true that the said country of Atlantis, as well that of Peru, then called Coya, as that of Mexico, then named Terambel, were mighty and proud kingdoms in arms, shipping and riches so mighty as at one time, or at least within the space of 10 years, they both made 2 great expeditions, they of Terambel through the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea, and they of Coya through the South Sea upon this island. And for the former of these, which was into Europe, the same author amongst you, as it seemeth, had some relation from the Egyptian priest whom he cited. For assuredly such a thing there was. But whether it were the ancient Athenians that had the glory of the repulse and resistance of these forces, I can say nothing, but certain it is that there never came back either ship nor man from that voyage. Neither had the other voyage of those of Coria upon us had any better fortune, if they had not met with enemies of greater clemency. For the king of this island, by name Altaban, a wise man and great warrior, knowing well both his own strength and that of his enemies, handled the matter so. As he cut off their land forces from their ships and entwined both their navy and their tamp with greater power than theirs, both by sea and land, Arad compelled them to render themselves without striking stroke, and after they were at his mercy, contented himself only with their oath that would no more bear arms against him, dismissed them all in safety. But the divine revenge overtook not long after those proud enterprises. For within less than the space of 100 years the great Atlantis was utterly lost and destroyed. Not by a great earthquake, as your man saith, for that whole tract is little subject to earthquakes, but by a particular deluge or inundation, those countries having at this day far greater rivers and far higher mountains to pour down waters than any part of the old world. But it is true that the same inundation was not deep, not past 40 foot in most places from the ground, so that although it destroyed man and beast generally, yet some few wild inhabitants of the wood escaped. Birds also were saved by flying to the higher trees and woods. For as for men, although they had buildings in many places higher than the depth of the water, yet that inundation, though it were shallow, had a long continuance, whereby they of the vale that were not drowned perished for want of food and other things necessary. And I'm at a good time here, and as I was reading through the story, the next bit sort of gets a little bit insulting to Native Americans. And I had someone recently point out to me that that's a bit of an issue with some of the stuff that I've been reading. I've gone on long enough, and I think that is a good point to cut the story off. If you'd like to carry on where it goes and see the rather paternalistic attitudes of Francis Bacon towards Native American folks, you can hit the link in the show notes and take a look. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Desire by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.